Hello, I'm a Beat Saber mapper. I've been making maps for roughly 5 years now, and today I'm going to help you use the lighting sections of the official editor. Lighting has always kind of come easy to me. I've always had a fascination from it, even all the way back on the PlayStation VR. And now that I am lighting my own maps more than ever, I would like to help other people who've been struggling with it because I've been there too. You open up the editor, you go to the lighting tab, and then you see the wall of tabs that is at the bottom. If I'm recalling correctly, Britney Spears was pretty bad about it. So yeah, my goal today is to make it easier by breaking it down into different sections. First, I'll talk about the F2 screen and the different types of events that you can place along the timeline. And then I'll break them down individually with their quirks and their nuances. Then I'll talk about the F3 screen and how you can use that to benefit yourself. And I'll showcase some of the worst cases per se. So yeah, let's get started. Oh my gosh, why is Minecraft popping up? Why is Chrome Mapper popping up? I didn't click that. Oh my gosh, get out of here. Now we are back roughly where we were at the last episode. This time I'm on the information panel because there's two things that we got to do before we start lighting. And the first thing is, well, putting our name on here. And secondly, we have to pick our environment. Now, there are a lot of different environments, and half of them are the older environments, and half of them are the newer ones. To make things simple, I would recommend just using the Weave environment, the EDM environment, the second, or Dragon 2, because those are super simple. It can help you kickstart on learning the quirks with the editor. And in general, they don't have too many tabs with them, so they shouldn't be too overwhelming. Right. So now we are in the F2 screen. Now, the first thing I want to talk about are the events. Each tab have different lanes in them, and they can control different parts of the environment. The grouping of this is based on what the developers saw would be the most efficient. So for the weave environment, we have the outer square, and then we have the inner square, the side square, and finally the distance square. So there's 4 lanes contained in 4 different sections. Now that we've got that out the way, let's take a look at some of the universal things with each event. Let's, for now, just place a light event in the first lane that you see. So over here on the right, you will see a list of things. You'll see group info, duration, filter and order, limit, and distribution. Group info is basically how you can tell what you're affecting. For example, we are currently in the bottom left lane in the outer square. So in this lane, there are 8 different lasers to control. Duration is basically how long it takes for this event to completely take place. Right now it's at 0, so the moment that the game registers this event, everything turns on. Well, if we change this number to 1, for example, then they turn on over the course of 1 beat. If we were to change this to step, then instead of going over 1 beat, each light would turn on 1 step after another. This is how you can control the speed of which things get affected. Next is filter and order. So here we have chunks, sections, and steps, and then randomization. The way chunks work is that you can basically divide the amount of IDs into different chunks. So let's say we wanted to have 2 different chunks. You can put this as 2. And now, well, it seems like nothing changed, right? Let's go back to duration. Now let's set this as 1. Now you can see that it only takes 2 steps. That's because there's 2 chunks. They basically turn all the IDs into smaller, more constrained IDs. So like there's 8 in total here, but we just split it from 8 to 2. For now, let's just put these back to 0. Next, we have section and step. So section and step is another way to kind of sort through the lights, the IDs. So if we set the chunks to 4, this will make it to where instead of 8 IDs, there's 4 IDs. And then sections is, well, sections. Hey, future me here. I spent this section trying to explain sections and steps in a way that you can visualize. But in case that doesn't work out too well, you can just go to the link in the description. I hopefully put it there. There's a documentation section on the Beat Saber website that actually explains how a lot of the stuff works. I did refer to this a few times when I started out. It can be helpful. So, yeah. Let's set it to 4. So now we have 4 different chunks and we can sort through them during the different sections. So we have the first section, second section, third section, and fourth section. And then step is the same thing, except that it's not trying to divide the amount of IDs. It's simply just taking the steps. So if we do like, it starts at the first ID and then it takes 2 steps, then you'll see that skips the second chunk. If it's set the light ID to 2, then you see it shift. This can be very useful if you're trying to get certain motions in order, or if you're trying to get like a certain divided effect. So for now, then we do 2 sections. Let me add another lane by clicking the plus button, and then we'll have 2 sections and second ID. Now we split 1 lane into 2 actions. This is kind of the universal way you can interact with events throughout all of them. But we're not quite done yet because we have 2 more things to talk about. Randomization and limits. Future CMP again. I don't know why I struggled so much to talk about randomization, so I'm going to do it right now. So basically, what I have here is I have 2 different lights. I have the bottom left with the red notes kind of fading in and out, and I have the same on the other side with blue lights. So I'll show you real quick. So it's a simple effect. I have it where it turns on, then it fades dim a little bit, and then it fades down to nothing. I have it going over 2 measures, and that's it. But randomness kind of changes that. It makes it random. So first you click it, and then you click this cycle button to give some random series of integers. And then when you play, you'll notice it's in a different order. And yeah, you're gonna want to make sure that you click this button at least once, because for some reason, I'm pretty sure there's a bug where every time you click the random button, it gives you the same starting number. Yeah, see? Same starting number. So always make sure you click this before you click random. Sorry, after you click random. So now if we take a look, it's a lot more scattered. It's a lot different than what it was before. That's how randomness works. Now, limit, I'm not going to explain. I would recommend just asking someone. I have no proper understanding of it. This is not the place to learn this specific niche tool. I'm sorry. Anyways, back to past me. Anyways, now we have distribution. This varies depending on what kind of events you're working with. So I'll break them down as we talk about it. Since we're going to be talking about lights first, and we're already here, we might as well discuss about it. So I'm going to exit out, delete the event, and have a new one to reset everything. Now, let's take a look at the left UI. Over here, we have a few different categories to work with. First, we have the colors of lights, which clicking them gives you, well, different colors. Then you have the different values. This is where you can control how bright the events are. So let's say we wanted to have a red light, but it was half as bright. Then you set it to 50. There you go. Well, let's say you want it to go away and you don't want it to just turn on. Well, these triangle events are called transitions. These will transition the previous light event into the next light event. So let's say we wanted to go from a dim red 50 light to a bright blue 100 light? Well, by placing transition there you go. You made it work. And combining these kinds of elements, we can really start to control just what's going on with the lights. So there you go. Next, we have the strodes and the brightness. These are a bit more technical, so I'm not going to go too in depth about them, but basically, if you click these, it'll give you different variations of strobing. So let's say we have a strobe of 8 and we have a 100 brightened blue light. Doesn't look too good, but that's what it is. Turning off and on constantly. You can control how bright the light is by holding Alt and moving the scroll wheel. You can control the brightness of these, like this strobe, the off light, by holding Control, Alt, and scrolling. And then you can control the precision of it by holding Control, Alt, Shift, and scrolling. A lot of controls, I know. And that wraps up the lights section. Now, let's talk about rotation and translation. Now, for this, I will be switching over to a different environment because this one does not have what I'm going to be talking about. So, for now, you don't have to do this. I'm going to switch over to colliders because this has everything that I'm looking for. Right, there we go. Don't mind the events that I already have played out. So now that we've talked about lights, let's move over to the next lane, rotation. So this whole section of me explaining rotations and whatnot, basically just me blabbering. So I'm going to delete that and try again. So I've already got it set up. I have the center blocks rotated to 270 degrees on the z-axis. Don't worry, this all makes sense soon. So before we talk about rotations specifically, we need to talk about what rotations and translations share. So both of them operate on a 3D grid with the X, Y, and Z axis. If you don't understand these, I should pull up some sort of Blender example image or something. I'm not sure. Anyways, the thing that both movement and rotation have in common are the easings. There are two different categories. There's the speed in which it moves, and then there's how it moves. So if we take a look here, we have three different selections. This is inwards easing, outwards easing, and in and out easing. These basically give you different effects, and I will just show you now. This is inwards easing. This is outwards easing. And this is in and out easing. Now, the reason why all look sharp is because the next thing I'm going to talk about, the types of easing. What I was using was what I call cubic easing. The one before it is quadratic easing. This is the softer one. I'll show you what it looks like in action. Unlike cubic easing, it's a lot more soft. It's a lot more gradual. There's not a point where you can look and say, yeah, that's the turning point. Before that, we have linear. This ignores all types of easing and just goes from one place to the other. It's very simple. Point A to point B. And then finally, we have some of the more fun ones. This one, I'm not sure what it's called. It's BK. I refer to it as the rubber easing or Boldat for some reason. Basically, what happens is that when you have it go from one position to another, it will actually go over that position a little bit. Almost like it's gravitating towards the desired position. Then we have elastic easing. This one doesn't just go over at one time, it goes back and forth a little bit, like it's wiggling into place. Then finally, we have bounce. This one is the most self-explained easing that I could give. It bounces. And again, this isn't only restricted to rotation. This also works in Translation. So if we take the x-axis as 0 and then we make it bounce over 100 units, you see it works here too. All right, so that basically wraps up rotation. Translation honestly isn't really too much different besides, it just moves in that direction. So I'm not going to go over it too much. All you need to know is that for rotation, if you were to use distribution for it, there's a cap. At some point, it will loop back on itself, and translation doesn't have that. But besides that, they're basically the same, and we can move on from this section. All right, so I'm going to put it back to the weave environment for now. This is subjective to change. And now we get to talk about the F3 screen. I should have stayed on colliders. Now we get to talk about the F3 screen. So every environment has their own little quirks with it. Some of them only have 2 lanes like we see here, and some of them have 10 or something. I'm looking at you, Fallout Boys. So in general, almost every environment is going to have boost colors and ambient. Boost colors basically help you to flip whatever color palette you're using. So if you have like the 2 regular lights and colors, you can turn this on to make it flip to the other set. And then ambient, also varying in size depending on the environment, is basically the back glow. What things look like behind all the objects. So yeah, pretty simple. The last thing I have to talk about before I start talking about the environment are float values and the color palettes. So for now, we're going to start with the color palettes. This is technically the F4 screen, but it's been removed to this dropdown. Oops. So the way you make your own color scheme is that you click the plus icon. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it groove sauce. And then here you can click each of the different sets and change the colors based on the hex code, based on the RGB values, or you can just use this really cool interactive color wheel or whatever it's called. I'm going to make some pretty simple colors real quick, so give me a second. All right, now I've made myself a color scheme. Now, make sure that you click Use Color Override if you want to actually see this in your environment. So now, if I turn these on, we can see that's on here. And you can see it change with the booster lights. If you don't want to use it, or if you want to use something else, you can always turn off the color override and it will resort back to the environment's default. And then the last thing we have to talk about are the float lanes. Floats are kind of stupid because they can be whatever the developers want them to be. Sometimes it's changing the size of the object. Sometimes it's changing what's displayed. Sometimes it's changing the position. It can be kind of whatever they want it to be, and you're just going to have to deal with it. Some of them have fixed numbers for things. Some of them have a cap and will loop back on itself or just stop. It's really annoying. Float values are basically just all the extra stuff that they did not want to throw in the F3 screen, and now you got to deal with it. So now that covers everything I can reasonably tell you for lighting in the official editor. All that I have left now is to tell you about the types of environments and some of the ones that I would personally recommend based on my taste. But this is the end of everything you need to know. Now let's get to the environments. So if you want to actually see the list of environments, you can go to the link below at the BSMG Wiki. It'll take you directly to the list. There's a lot of them. They are separated between version 2, the old lights, and version 3, the new lights. The old ones are all connected in some sort of fancy manner because they all had the same amount of lanes. So if you played something on the spooky environment and you wanted to play on the Lincoln Park environment, well, it would work because they had the same amount of lanes. They started changing that around like the for the Interscope environment, but after that, they just decided to completely pivot over to a new lighting system. Now here, even though they're all lumps under the group lighting system name or version 3, there are actually three different types of environments to me. The first ones are stages. These are your Dragon 2, your Rock, Pyro, Lizzo, Weekend. These are environments that are set. They are stages. You can control how they perform and what they show, but at the end of it, it's still stage and you can see all the works on it. There's only so much you can control. Then we got these sandbox environments. Daft Punk, Panic 2, Monster Cat 2, Linkin Park 2, Metallica. These environments, while still kind of constrained in some form or manner, give you a lot to work with and you can make some pretty interesting stuff in it. You still have limitations, like with Daft Punk in the heads and those weird diamond things. Panic 2 with the equalizer and the window, Britney with the speakers and whatnot. You can still easily tell what the environment is, but it's a sandbox. You get to mess around. And then you have the canvas environments. I'm talking Coldplay. I'm talking EDM. I'm talking Lattice, Cube, Colliders. Oh, I love Colliders, man. It's my favorite environment. These environments are super loose with what you can do. Yeah, there's a set amount of pieces that you have to work with and you could probably recognize the environment quickly. But there's so much expression that you can do with these. There's so much creativity at your disposal. Most of my maps that I work with are with Monster Cat 2 and Colliders, and I have more fun with Colliders than I do with any other environment. It is super fun to work with the reflections and all the different lasers. Okay, yeah. Yep, like I thought. I've used Colliders for 7 levels and Monster Cat 2 for 6 levels, which is a lot considering that these light shows can take quite a bit of time to make. So, that is all. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from this. Yeah, no, I still don't know how to end the video properly, so